Francis Scott Key wasn't a general. He wasn't a president, and he sure as hell wasn't looking to be remembered forever. He was a lawyer who just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time, stuck on a British ship while an entire city fought for its life. And instead of panicking or praying or doing something normal, he pulled out a scrap piece of paper and wrote a poem. A poem that got slapped into the tune of a British drinking song of all things and somehow became the best song in the world. The America National Anthem. Yep, the words you hear before every ball game, before every medal ceremony, and every 4th of July fireworks show, they came from a guy who was just trying to pass the times while the rockets and mortars lit up the sky. And that guy was Francis Scott Key. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not one small step for man.
Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
We pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Francis Scott Key was born in 1779 on a Maryland plantation into a well-off family of planters. Educated at St. John's College in Annapolis, he studied the classics and law. And by his 20s, he was practicing as a respected attorney in Georgetown, moving comfortably amongst Washington's elite. He was devout, quiet, deeply religious. Politics wasn't his ambition, but when the War of 1812 broke out, Key was pulled into the storm. By 1814, the United States was in dire straits. The British had burned Washington, the capital lay in ashes, and Baltimore was the next target. Fort McHenry, guarding the entrance to the harbor, was all that stood in the way of British warships leveling the city. Key wasn't a soldier that year. He was acting as a negotiator. He boarded a British ship and helped secure the release of an American prisoner. The talks succeeded, but there was a catch. Key and his companions had heard too much about the British plans, and they wouldn't be released until after the attack on Baltimore. And that's how Francis Scott Key found himself stuck on a ship, forced to watch one of the most intense bombardments in American history. On the night of September 13th and 14th, 1814, the British ships pounded Fort McHenry with rockets and mortars. The sky lit up red and white as bombs exploded over the harbor. And from his vantage point on the British ships, Key could do nothing but watch. He wondered if Baltimore would survive. All night long, shells fell. At times, the explosions lit up the American flag still flying over the fort, and at times, the smoke and darkness hid it completely. Key later wrote that terrible uncertainty, watching, waiting, and praying that the flag would still be there when dawn came. And when the morning broke and the smoke cleared, it was there. The massive garrison still flying, the massive garrison's flag still flying defiantly over Fort McHenry. Baltimore had held, and America survived. Overwhelmed, Key began scribbling lines of a verse on the back of a letter he carried. His poem, called Defiance at Fort McHenry, it circulated in newspapers. It set to the tune of a popular British drinking song, To Anacurin in Heaven. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Who cares? It's British. But what it is now is awesome. The words fit the music perfectly, and the song spread. The Star-Spangled Banner became a patriotic favorite in the 19th century amongst soldiers and veterans. More than a century later, 1931, Congress made it the official national anthem of the United States. Best song in the world, in my opinion. I love it so much. Key returned to his law practicing after the war and remained an influential figure in Washington. He argued cases before the Supreme Court, served briefly as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, and moved in circles of presidents and statesmen. But his legacy wasn't his legal career. It was in those 4 verses written under fire. And actually, there's a lot more to the song than we sing when we hear the national anthem. It's actually extremely beautiful, the rest of it. I've heard it recently. He never imagined his poem would outlive him, yet it became one work of art almost every American would know by heart. And Francis Scott Key is the lawyer, negotiator, and reluctant poet of a nation. He didn't lead troops or draft laws, but when history put him on a ship in Baltimore Harbor, he gave the United States something just as enduring, a song born in the smoke of battle, stitched into the fabric of the flag himself. He reminded Americans that their survival was never guaranteed, but their defiance was always strong. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you haven't listened to the national anthem in a while, I recommend you do it, and I think you should do it a lot. In my opinion, is the best song ever written. And remember, history isn't boring. It's the story of ordinary people who witness extraordinary moments and give them the words that last forever. I'll see you next time.